The Chicago Bears, a lot has been going on recently, and Reese and I have stayed relatively quiet. I think that outside of just being extremely busy last week, we both are trying to stay a little bit more level-headed with this. And God, showing Bears Twitter, I don't think level-headed was a good way to describe anyone in the fan base this past week. And I think the main reason why has less to do with even any of the players that the Bears signed, and more so with the fact that it was just such a huge letdown.
Yeah.
Every single person was talking about on YouTube, on Twitter, Deshaun Watson, Russell Wilson, all these huge names, and that the Chicago Bears are really trying to make a push for that. And
Trent Williams.
Yeah, Trent Williams, Kenny Galladay, guys who were the premier, the cream of the crop. And then they get smacked with Andy Dalton. And that sort of dichotomy there, that doesn't bode well for the fans of the Chicago Bears, and it led to a lot of fans getting mocked for things they said in the past. Obviously we were major people talking about these rumors as they were legitimate rumors. The Chicago Bears offered 3 first-round picks, Khalil Mack and Akeem Hicks. I mean, that is a massive package to offer for Russell Wilson. And hey, there's a lot of reporters that are still saying that this isn't over. A lot of reporters are saying this isn't over. And by looking at Dalton's contract numbers and how they can get him down to being under $5 million in contract this year, based on certain different incentives they have for him, there is room for a Russell Wilson move, but the chance of it happening at this point, it's next to nothing. And I've already set myself on the idea that the Chicago Bears team needs to rebuild, and that's what the Chicago Bears are doing. You can't listen to a franchise. The Bears are so media trained, and so are so many other NFL teams, and listening and taking what they say for exactly what it is going to lead you to getting misled 24/7. Okay. Yeah. What's better to look at is the actual moves that they are making, the way they're structuring contracts. Andy Dalton was put up there and said he's the QB1, the starting quarterback for the future. Guys, come on. If he was QB1, he wouldn't be getting a $10 million contract, which is backup average this year. It's been about 10 million. And then outside of that, it can come down to even 5 million. I will reassure you that Andy Dalton is not going to be, the franchise QB going forward. Will he start at the beginning of the season? I think so. Could he potentially start all of next year? That's also a possibility that's on the table. And we're going to get into more of the exact players, but I just want Bears fans to be really cognizant, especially our podcast listeners, to be really cognizant of not what the Chicago Bears are saying, more so what they are doing. It was the same thing with Mike Glennon, where he came in and he's the starter. Ryan and John Fox told him he was the starter. And you just need to be a little bit more. Don't get caught up in the media game. Andy Dalton is not the starter for the future, okay? He is going to be that bridge guy. The Chicago Bears team is rebuilding. That's why they released Kyle Fuller. That's why they were looking to trade Akeem Hicks. It looks like he's being kept by now. That's why all this stuff is happening, And I just think before we really get into the show, that needs to be stated. All right, guys, really quickly before we continue with the show, we have to let you know that this podcast is supported by Manscaped, who is the best in men's below-the-waist grooming. Manscaped offers precision-engineered tools for your family jewels, and they obsess over their technology developments. They're trusted by over 2 million men worldwide, and we have an exclusive offer code for our listeners, 20% off plus free shipping using code BEARNECESSITIES, no space, at manscaped.com. Manscaped sent both Reese and I over a bunch of their tools and formulations from their Perfect Package 3.0. And guys, Manscaped is a great company. They wanted us to wait until we try the products to give you guys our honest opinion. And it is a very good product. They have no-nick technology and a little LED light, which helps you get the job done a little bit easier. Both Reese and I have really enjoyed the Lawnmower 3.0 so far, and we're looking forward to trying a lot of their other products. The underwear that they sent us in the box too has been spectacular, and if you guys are into athletics or go to the gym frequently, highly recommend those as well. And guys, really quickly, if you use the same razor on your face as below the waist, guys, that's a little bit nasty. Try to pick up something specifically engineered for that below the waist region with the Lawnmower 3.0. Get 20% off and free shipping with the code BareNecessities at Manscaped.com. That's 20% off and free shipping using code BareNecessities at Manscaped.com. Make sure you check how to spell that in the description. That's going to support the podcast tremendously. Unlock your confidence and always use the right tools for the job with Manscaped.
Yeah, I mean, the Bears literally did just put out the tweet, like, I don't know, maybe 2 hours ago that put QB1 by Andy Dalton. And, you're right. I mean, it's pretty disgusting to see that. I have to say that when you look at that post, you're like, that's pretty uninspiring, I'm not going to lie. And you're right. I mean, he is QB1, but not in the sense that a lot of their teams say QB1, Mm-hmm. Like, you sometimes reserve that for a franchise quarterback, and I understand that it's denoting the term on the depth chart that's just literally, QB 1, 2, and, the very few times there's 3 in the league. I know some teams like to do that. But, it kind of connotates, in a very grammatical way, it connotates to a little bit more endearing of a term when you put something like that. And, yeah, it's hard to exactly draw that with Andy Dalton. And in the actual sense, sure, yeah, I agree with you. I think he's gonna probably start all of the season unless we end up drafting someone that really puts the pressure on him, And I guess things could go wrong with him. They say, okay, maybe we want to stick Foles in. There's a couple other scenarios that could happen here, but I could see him in general sense if things just go bad instead of really bad. He'll probably start out the season unless there's something in the draft coming that we don't foresee. Yeah, it's just tough to get excited, though. Yeah, I'll say that. I mean, how can you really sit back here and be like, yeah, Andy Dalton, that's the boy right there. Like, he's going to get it done. He's not.
Yeah, let's go ahead and start this off with, the first segment being, we're going to get into the rest of the free agent class, but let's just talk about Andy Dalton right now. Andy Dalton, let me first say this. I talked about earlier in the podcast how the reason why so many Bears fans hated the signing is because it came at a time where they actually thought they were going to get Russell Wilson. And that is understandable. Bears fans, it seems like Ryan Pace and them tried. But it seems like what's going to happen here is that A, yeah, they're rebuilding clearly, but B, the Bears are looking at Andy Dalton and what they see in him is a potential Alex Smith for Patrick Mahomes, a potential Ryan Fitzpatrick for Tua Tagovailoa. I don't even know how to say his name. Yeah, Tua. Okay.
Yeah.
They see a guy that ideally will start the entire season and allow Ryan Pace to take his time with a quarterback. They're looking at Andy Dalton it's like almost remaking what happened in 2017 with Mike Lennon and Trubisky, except right. They are hoping, I mean, it's safe to say that, Andy Dalton's going to be a lot better than that, considering he was a starter in this league for, like 7 years. Something like that. With the Bengals. I think Andy Dalton, honestly, I think he's going to be better than what Mitch gave us last year. I think that's a very hot take amongst Bears fans, but I believe Andy Dalton will at least show to be competent. I think that's what he showed when he was with the Cowboys. I think that's even what he showed when he was with the Bengals. He had a couple good seasons with the Bengals as well. It wouldn't surprise me if Andy Dalton has a pretty decent year. I'm not too concerned with Dalton. Is Dalton going to take us to the Super Bowl or on a major playoff run? No, that's not what Dalton is going to do. But Dalton is going to be formidable enough to allow you to actually take some time this time and to develop a young quarterback. And I think that's the plan. I would really be shocked if we don't draft a quarterback this year. Really shocked. And the main reason why is because Dalton's deal is a 1-year contract. So it make it, when you look at the money and where the money is located, like we said earlier, it looks like right now Dalton is the quarterback for this year. And as long as all that goes well, I think the reason why we could potentially keep Nick Foles, similar to what the Packers did with Jordan Love, is so that there's not even a chance to bring in the new guy and you really get your quarterback a redshirt year. And, you know, the complexity of Matt Nagy's scheme and, you know, a lot of the West Coast variants, it's difficult enough where that could be the right idea. And if you're looking at the quarterbacks on the board, which again we're going to get into later, but there's a couple guys on there that are really good skill set guys, but have some things that they have to learn. And I think that the Bears could potentially be targeting some of those guys.
Yeah, and maybe that's what Pace and Nagy sold the ownership on. And this past offseason is kind of riding this plan and being like, hey, we're going to pick up quarterback, but we have no intention of playing them, you know, the first year. Want to let them sit. Probably sold, and Nagy was probably like, hey, look, in a similar system, they did the same thing with Mahomes. Didn't give him the keys to the car right away, but taught him how to do it, and he came out fire. And I'm sure, you know, kind of gives Nagy and Pace, instead of just like a 1 year window to try to improve everything, it basically extends their chances, increases their chances by, you know, giving them, you know, a little bit extra time to pull it off. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if that's, you know, the case. Yeah, I think with Dalton, I think that, yeah, he might have a good year, at least in comparison to his own standards. I could see him doing better than he did on the Cowboys, but it could be the perfect thing that the Bears need in this, you know, transition year, if that's what it ends up being out, you know, a rebuild or a retool year, so they can be in a better position a year from now. You know, I'm not even confident that Dalton could take us to, if our team was 8-8 last year, I mean, the sky's the limit. He could go like 6-10. I mean, better yet, 4-12 if we're buying into this kind of just selling the season off. And I know that that hurts, but I think that Bears fans, as to at least what we have right now, have to be pretty realistic and go that, you know, this isn't a playoff team. At least we know it's not a team that's going to contend. And since we know that, we might as well just be realistic and be like, man, I hope that they don't, you know, place 8-8 again and just stick with that mediocre mid-round first-round draft pick.
Well, that's the thing, is that I almost feel like, because I do feel like Dalton has the opportunity to be better than Trubisky was, mainly because I'm not saying that he is necessarily, I mean, the money that he got compared to other, I mean, look at the money that Mitch got. He was on pace for like a 40 touchdown season. He got like $1 million to be a backup for Buffalo. He didn't even get a second shot, which is crazy for someone drafted that high. You know,
yeah, the rap is so bad for him.
Yeah, so it's like one of those things where it's like, okay, when you at least look at the money does dictate something. We know that multiple people were in on Andy Dalton. Didn't really seem like too many people were interested in Mitchell Trubisky. There's definitely a bigger desire for Dalton to be a backup than there was for Mitchell Trubisky. So when you follow that sort of logic, I think Bears fans had a really flawed outlook on Trubisky. Like, I really do. I think that because of what Matt Nagy was able to do with Bill Lazor towards the end of the year and how well they were able to play to Mitch's strengths, which isn't a lot, I think that it gave us fans a lot more hope than there necessarily was. So it almost makes me feel like this team could easily go 8-8 again. Like, this team could easily, especially when you take away the whole 6-game losing streak. I mean, I think if you ran it back with the last year's team with only Mitchell Trubisky, I think we would have done better than 8-8 anyways. So it's like, if Dalton is a more desirable QB than Mitchell Trubisky, it's almost like the team didn't really get that much worse around him. I think there's arguments that at certain positions they got better. So you kind of wonder, like, could they do better than 8-8? And here's my response is I hope not. Truthfully, I think that having, a down year, getting our quarterback this year, hopefully we don't need to trade away another first round pick, although we might. Let's say we don't trade away our first round pick next year and we have that first round pick still. Hey, then you have a young quarterback, maybe a top 10 pick going into 2022. And this team, it looks like it's in a completely different direction.
Yeah, and that'd be great, but the Bears almost always seem to fail at doing that. So I'm sure, come like December, we'll be looking at a team that's, I don't know, 7-7.
I could see it.
8-5, and we're gonna be like, everyone's gonna be gearing up, being like, oh, this team might be able to make a playoff push, and we all know deep in our heads that they really don't have the depth to do it. They really don't have it, but we'll be in a very similar position next. Because you're right. I mean, they need to shore up this offensive line, and I'm sure people are screaming, their lungs off already, being like, why haven't you guys been talking about offensive line? It's still, hasn't been addressed. And 100%, I will scream that, on the top of my lungs too, and, shout from the rooftops that the Bears need to start adding some pieces of this offensive line. I hope that it comes to the draft at this point. I'm not 100% sure. A lot of these big name guys, and maybe the Bears didn't ever really quite have the room for them, are off the board. So hopefully there is some support coming from at least somewhere. But yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting outlook going into the next year, and it's hard to believe that the Bears will do anything else than be the Bears. I mean, that's a shitty take, honestly, to give, but I guess it kind of rides the rhetoric a little bit that some fans like to hear, that just the Bears will be the Bears. And unfortunately, it tends to be the case, which is why people can continue to say it, because things just always seem to happen in the same way for this team.
Yeah, and I'm hoping this is like, the Bears this year are going to try to do something right for the first time, where it's like, they're not necessarily going to like try to win again. I'm so happy they're not trying to run it back. Like, thank God they're not trying to run it back again. At least they are moving in a direction, because we already spent essentially 2 years trying to run it back, and it yielded the same 8-8 result. Like, those 2 years were, in my opinion, more painful than even the seasons under John Fox, because it's like you're treading water. And now the Bears have made a decision on what they're doing, and I agree with their decision, truthfully. There's a couple players that we're going to see walk, which is going to be sad, and this defense will not have the same players that it had in 2018. It really won't. By the time this team is relevant again, what's going to be holding them up is, in an ideal world, their offense. And they're going to be trying to find replacements for major players like Kyle Fuller, who they already released, and older guys like Danny Trevathan and Akeem Hicks. And obviously like Roy Robertson here. Potentially even Khalil Mack. We'll get to that later in the show.